Welcome to Founders Marketing Compass. My name is Etgar Shpivak. With my experience as a co-founder and as a marketer, I'm interviewing founders, investors, and marketers to learn how to build healthy, lasting relationships between startup founders and their marketing team. Today, I have the pleasure to host Udi Ledergor, Chief Evangelist and the former CEO at Gong, and in a personal note, one of the most senior marketer ever came out of Israel. Oh, Udi.
Edgar, excited to be here. Just small correction. I'm not the CEO, but the CMO of Gong. I don't think I would take the CEO's job anytime soon. He's doing a great job there.
So, as the former CMO, we normally hosting the founders and the investors, and we want to take your perspective on this relationship. And before we dive into the questions, happy to learn more about yourself and about your journey.
Yeah, so I'm Udi. I'm 50 years old, born and raised in the Tel Aviv area. For the Israelis in the audience, the broader Gush Dan area. I've lived in Holon, Ramat Gan, Givatayim, Ramat HaSharon, Tel Aviv, and Yafo, so all over the place. 6.5 years ago, I moved to the Bay Area. I'm living in San Francisco with my husband and our 3 children. I've been working at Gong for the last 8.5 years. And so I started working for Gong in Israel, and a couple of years into it, my CEO, Amit, and I agreed that the go-to-market team needs to be based in the West Coast. So packed up the family and we moved here, and it's been a great experience for us ever since. Prior to Gong, I led 4 other marketing teams at other Israeli-founded global startups, names like Sarin Technologies, Panaya, and even some short stints at companies like Yotpo. I've done, and I'm still doing some board work, advisory work, speaking work, and a bunch of other exciting stuff. And yeah, trying to enjoy time with family off of work, doing hikes. We've got beautiful nature here in California and in the Bay Area, and enjoying everything life has to give us.
So, when I talk with founders and with investors, we dive deep into those KPIs set from the leadership to the marketing team. And how do you, as the CMO, translate those very high level business metrics that you get from the board or from the founders into actionable KPIs?
So the way we do things at Gong, and we've had a pretty tight planning process, even from the very, very early days, where I've been at other startups that waited much longer for that level of planning maturity. But at Gong, we believe there's a lot of value in the planning process, even if the initial plan that we come up with is not going to be accurate and precise. There's a lot of value in ironing things out and working out the details in the planning process. And so what that looks like at Gong, we typically start sitting down around July to plan next year. So we give ourselves 5 or 6 months to do this. And at the ELT or executive level, we come up with anything between 1 and 3 goals. In the early days, it was easier to keep it simple and have 1 or maybe 2. These days, it's more like 3 or 4, but we try to keep it down to 3. And those high-level goals are then given to each function: marketing, sales, finance, people, product, engineering, everyone else, to go and derive their own goals and targets and KPIs from those high-level company goals. And we continue that exercise. So, for example, let's give an example. Let's say we have 2 goals at the company level of category leadership and customer retention. And we translate that into more exact numbers, of course. But then within marketing, I would sit with my marketing leadership team and see, what do we have to do in demand gen? What do we have to do in brand? What do we have to do in product marketing? What do we have to do in comms to serve those higher level goals? And then within their teams, they do the same exercise. And within the demand gen team, what does the website team need to do? What does the events team need to do? What does the paid advertising team need to do? And so on and so on. And that gives everyone a clear sense of priorities and purpose, because even the person running social media or a tech support engineer or a recruiting coordinator understands how her targets roll up into her bigger team targets and how that rolls up into the bigger company targets. And then we report on those targets at some levels on a weekly level, at other levels on a monthly or quarterly level. But we know how we're serving the bigger purpose, and that's how we keep everyone aligned.
And if I take you to the early days of Gong, or going back into those C to A startups, and in those stages that you've been there, what have you done in those cases where it's very nice to say, hey, this is Gong, and we can plan 6 months ahead. If you're a small startup and your runway is year and a half, and sometimes you have a problem, and then you figure out all you have in the bank is like 10 months. How do you do it when you're much shorter, when you have way more weight on your shoulder?
I don't know that the weight lifts at any point. Yes, it's very stressful to have to get to that first $100,000 or $1 million. I don't think it's an easy job getting to 200 or 300 or 500 million.
Ah,
Don't
I
let's not
definitely
pretend that the weight lifts.
didn't meant it by no mean. I meant more in the runway perspective, when you know
Yeah.
that the company have 10 months of runway, and you have to do stuff yesterday.
So our work is always going to be a juggling act between short term and long term, because if we plan everything for short term, we're never going to build a long term sustainable company, because there are things that you need to start building early. Like you need to build a product that's actually going to be the infrastructure and base of a long term successful product. You can't just build features that your first customer wants. You need to think of, what is my product vision? What am I building for the long term? In marketing, we need to think about, how do we create a brand that people start talking about us, that will serve us in the long term. We might not see the fruits in the first 6 months, but if I only think about what I need to produce in the first 6 months, I'm never going to get to creating those long term efforts. Building a brand, building a category, building a platform, all these things take years, not weeks, not months. And so I've seen this because I've worked for first time founders, I worked for second time founders, I worked for serial entrepreneurs. And there's a level of maturity that is usually found in more experienced founders, where they know that they have to start planning for the long term from day one. And they've got to build something that they have a vision of how it's going to scale to a galactic level, not something tiny that 5 customers will find useful, which is what everyone tells us. You've got to begin by making your first 5 customers happy. That's inarguable. But having a vision of how we're going to get to 5,000 customers pretty early on. And I can get into details where it's interesting, but the idea is, and I see this sometimes with first time founders, where they have that mortality sort of panic mode that you talked about, where I don't even know if I'm going to be around next year, so I'm not going to invest in infrastructure, I'm not going to invest in process, I'm not going to invest in planning, I'm not going to bring people who know how to do what I'll need in 2 years. We'll just scramble and figure out how to do it. Now, sometimes it works. There's more than one way of building a successful company, and as one of the more successful investors and operators in the field, Gil Elad, says the best generic advice for startups is that there is no good generic advice for startups. So that's always good to keep in mind. But there are themes that, if you're as old as I am, and been in the business for long enough, you start seeing themes of what is more likely to succeed, and having a long-term plan and going through the process to get to it, even if you know that it's going to change multiple times, even throughout the first year, is a valuable part of building a mature business and giving it a real chance at being a sustainable business.
So we talk about, I made you for 5 seconds the former CEO. So if you're still the CMO, the former CMO, I want to have your take on the relationship of the CMO CEO. And in many cases, It can be in Gong right now. It can be in the early days of Gong or in the early days of other places. How do you, as the CMO, establish this relationship? How do you set the boundaries between this is the CEO role, this is the CMO role? We heard, for example, from other CMOs and from other CEOs. My goal as the CMO is I want to be behind the stage. My goal is to put the CEO on the stage. And happy to understand how do you, as the CMO, manage this relationship?
So there's a lot to unpack there. At the very end of your question, you asked something that sounds like who should be the face or the spokesperson of the company. Should it be the CEO or the CMO or someone else? So maybe I'll start with that and then work back to the larger question of uh, the CEO and CMO relationship and how that can work in different situations. So as for the spokesperson, I think it can go in a variety of ways. I've worked for companies where the CEO, either because of a language barrier or stage fright or just lack of interest in being the spokesperson and face of the company, left it all to me. And a lot more people knew me and identified me with the company than they did with our CEO. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I've also worked for companies like Gong is a good example where we have a pretty charismatic, outspoken CEO who does like getting out there and likes getting on stage at our events. Many times he'll send me to speak instead of him if he can't make it or doesn't want to make it, or he has to be in two different places at the same time. So I'll take one of those opportunities. But he is a pretty high-profile CEO. But not every CEO I've worked with wanted that role. Again, some of them struggled with English and we were selling into US and European markets. Some of them just didn't feel comfortable preparing for presentations and giving those presentations. So I was happy to take that from them. I'll also say there's a third option, and that is the spokesperson of the company or the face of the company does not have to be an executive, does not have to be the CEO, does not have to be the CMO. And I'll give an example from the early days of Gong when I made my first hire to start creating content for Gong under the title Gong Labs, where we created lots of content and still do to show sales professional what's working and what's not working in sales based on data and our AI analysis. I hired a pretty anonymous guy named Chris Orlov, and for the next 3 years, he created a ton of content and became very well known and built a huge personal brand because he's super talented and created great work, but did that under Gong and became very identified with the face of Gong. When he turned to the dark side and moved over to our sales team, I took another ex-salesperson, Devin Reed, who was pretty anonymous at that time, and brought him onto my team to continue the work that Chris started. And he took Gong Labs from mostly written blogs to video and live events. And Devin built a huge brand for himself and advanced Gong's brand and did those two things together really, really well. So Devin was everywhere all the time, and people knew that name far more than they knew my name or my CEO's name because he was out there. And so there are many options of doing this, and you don't have to force someone who is not naturally inclined to do public speaking or be on social media or won't put in the work to do it well. It doesn't have to be your CEO or CTO or CMO. It can be anyone from the marketing team or someone else. Today, I'm in a role as chief evangelist that I do a lot of that as my full-time job. So there's many ways of going around this. If you want to pick the company face, does not have to be an executive, does not have to be the CEO. Taking that to the broader question of the CEO and CMO relationship, I've worked with a few types of CEOs, and maybe I'll rank them in the following way. There's the CMO. There's the CEO who actually understands marketing, so he knows that he knows, and that's the case that I currently have at Gong. Amit Bendov and I have worked on and off at 3 different companies over the last 25 years, so we know pretty much what each other's capabilities and limitations are and how to work together. And he can be the biggest pain in the butt. I hope you're listening, Amit, because I've said this on multiple podcasts. But he's also the best leader I've ever worked for because he knows what great marketing looks like. He knows how to guide marketing. He knows how to be a sounding board to marketing. And he trusts me to take a lot of ideas that we come up together, or he comes up with, or I come up with, or someone else come up with, and go execute them and break them down to a program. The second type of CMO, which is also workable with, sorry, not CMO, CEO, is a CEO who knows that he doesn't know enough about marketing. And we had a CEO like that when Amit and I were at Panaya. So Amit was the CMO, I was the VP marketing. Our CEO was Yossi Cohen. Yossi was a brilliant technology person. He was a computer science PhD, or was working on his PhD when he founded Panaya. And he knew a lot about technology, but he did not know very much about go-to-market. And he realized that he doesn't know a lot about go-to-market. So he brought marketing and sales leaders who would teach him about these professions. And he gave them a lot of wiggle room, a lot of rope to go do what they need to do and educate Yossi about what they're doing and what the company needs to do. And that also worked very well most of the time. The third type of CEO, which is probably the most challenging to work with, is the CEO who doesn't know that he doesn't know. Okay? So my
By the way,
hierarchy
I
is...
would add the CEO who think that he know and he doesn't know. I would. I've
Yeah,
seen many
I'll
like this.
combine those two together. There's probably nuance there. You're right, Edgar, but I'll combine those together. Whether or not they know, they think they know, or they don't know that they don't know, they can get in the way of great marketing, and they can block a lot of great marketing because of multiple reasons. A, they might have unrealistic expectations of what marketing is supposed to do. Two, I've worked for a CEO briefly that knew so little about marketing that everything I did, he applauded to and said, "Oh, that's wonderful." And that feels good for the first few months. But then it gets a little frustrating because nobody's pushing back. Nobody's pushing me farther to do something better, or asking intelligent questions, or thinking together with me, what could we be doing even better? Or have you thought about this? I was getting no meaningful feedback, no pushback on anything. And this was pretty early in my career. And so again, it feels good. It strokes the ego really nicely in the first few months. But then you're like, but can someone actually challenge me so I become better, and maybe show me my blind spots and what am I not thinking about, and what someone else might have been doing in the situation? And so that's the problem with CEOs who either realize that they don't know, but they they won't bring anyone in to challenge and push back and be a bigger authority. Or like you said, they think they know. I've also had that situation where they just have unrealistic expectations about what marketing needs, what marketing can produce, and they get in the way and they create fear of failure rather than encourage curiosity, experimentations, big bets, and that sort of thing. And so choose your CEO wisely would be my number one piece of advice for CMOs. They can really determine how much joy you will get from your job, but also how successful and how long you'll keep that job.
I love it. And if I take it into actionable steps for the marketer that listening to this podcast and follow upping on this take, because I agree with you on 100%. I work with many founders. I see those CEOs who think they know, and it takes them a lot of time to understand they don't know. Those CEOs with the unrealistic expectation. And you said choose the CEO wisely. Do you have any advice for the CMO that interviewing right now at this company? How can he or she during the interview get a glimpse, or we never know in the job interview, but what are the questions that they need to ask the CEO, and what do they need to learn or to educate themselves in order to understand if they're facing this 1, 2, or horrible 3 type?
Yeah. So to do that well, I in risking making this a little bit more complicated, I would add that it's not just about exploring the CEO and her qualities, but also the company. And those things are very intertwined. So here's what I mean. I've learned how to do better due diligence on companies before joining them after making some mistakes along the way. And so this is really, really important. And maybe I'll jump to the spoiler of why I'm talking about this first, because if you pick the wrong company where marketing is not the biggest problem and you can't solve the biggest problem, which might be something like product market fit, then there's no way you can succeed there. And you might have a charming CEO who's a joy to work with, but if the product is not sticking with customers, if it doesn't solve a real problem, or if it is just too problematic that customers churn on you, you're not going to be able to solve that with the best marketing in the world, not for the long term. And so I would start by doing due diligence on the company, looking at things like, well, if they already rolled out a product, then there should be reviews on websites like G2 and Trustpilot, TrustRadius, and others. What are customers writing about the product? If they all love it, that's a great start. If they all hate it, that's not a great start. Go further into that. If they don't yet have a product that is publicly reviewed and they're still working on it or in stealth mode or about to release it, go talk to prospects, either that the company is already talking to or people that you know that would be potential users of the product, and ask them, like, is this a real problem that you're having? And would you pay for a product that would solve that? And try to do your own due diligence to understand if this is more than a hot air balloon, if they're actually working on a solution that is solves a big enough problem for people with enough power and resources to pay for it. And again, if it's already rolled out in the market, it's much easier to do that by looking at reviews and talking to actual customers. So those are some of the things I would check. I have a whole list of like due diligence that I would do on the founders and the investors and the runway and a bunch of other things. But let's say you went through that because you want to focus on the CEO relationship. I would start and ask the CEO, what will success in my role look like for you in 6 to 12 months? Like if we're sitting a year from now, after I've been working with you, what will need to happen by then for you to say, you crushed it? You did an amazing job. And I want to hear in very specific terms, what is he or she looking for? Because I want to hear that they're looking for things that I think I have control over. I think they're within my domain of expertise, and I think they can be accomplished. And so I'll start with success. And then if that still sounds realistic and good, and I'll give an example, they might say, this year we need to create $10 million of pipeline. We need to get our messaging straight because we're rambling and we're talking about it in different ways. And we need to have a strong story that prospects understand what we do and we can cram it in, 2 minutes. And by the end of the year, so that's the pipeline we need. We need a strong story and maybe a few other tactical things like we want to do our first customer event and we want to do, some brand awareness investments. Okay, those are things that are within marketing's domain. And then I'll ask, okay, and what resources were you thinking of allocating to do this year? And then, if they say something like, well, we're really just still looking to raise money, so we probably have $5,000 for you to work with. I'm like, whoa, okay. You want me to create $10 million of pipeline, but I've got $5,000. I don't know how to do that. You probably need to find someone else who knows how to do that. And so those are my top questions. And every one of them is very telling because I'll give you an example. If the CEO thinks that you can fix something like customer satisfaction, if their current NPS is minus 50, but they make it your goal to get it to plus 50, but you don't control the product, well, I can tell everyone the product is great, but once they try it, they're going to see it's crap. I can't fix that NPS. That's not a marketing problem that I can fix. And that's just one example out of many. But you want to understand that their expectations for what success looks like are realistic, and then that the resource allocation behind those goals is also realistic, and that you feel comfortable signing up for all of those things. And then that happens every year after that as well. You and the sales leader and other leaders sign up for the goals, how much revenue and how much pipeline and what other metrics we need to achieve. You've got to be really comfortable. They should be stretch goals. They should be difficult. At one company we work for together, Amit and I at Panaya, we call them hardly achievable goals. So they should be hard, but they should be achievable, because if you consistently set something that's not achievable, people are going to lose all their motivation. They're going to leave. People want to feel that they're set up for success, and that involves setting up targets that are ambitious, that require a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and work to get there, but that we all see a path to getting there and that it's achievable. If they're too easy, that also means that they lose motivation. And it's probably also a bad way of running a company because you could be growing a lot faster and you could be paying unnecessary accelerators and bonuses if the targets are too low. So you want to set the target where they're hard. I can share one number like that I've seen used in various sales team. You want 70% of the team to hit 70% of their target. That means that your goals are in a difficult yet achievable place. If 100% of the reps are achieving 100 plus of their targets, the targets were too low. And if nobody's achieving the targets, then the targets were too high. So 70% achieving 70 is probably a good starting point to think about. And you can tweak that any way you want. And then think about every other function. Like, what can I set that's an achievable, but hardly achievable goal?
And how do you handle a response that actually, I love this answer, from like, what should a CMO get? So addressed to an answer like, I have no idea what are the goals. You will come as the CMO and, let's set them together. Because I see this type of question, of answer in various ways come up.
Okay, so that sounds like a CEO who knows that she doesn't know and needs some education. That's something I can work with. I would start with, okay, what are your company goals? What are you trying to achieve this year? And it could be certain milestones that the investors or board have set for the next round. So let's say, oh, we want to see 10 happy beta customers. That might be a role. Okay, and where are you now? Oh, I have one and I'm talking with one more. Okay, what seems to be the challenge of getting 10 more? And then work your way there and then see, okay, here's how marketing can help. I can do some brand awareness, which will let more people know about you. Actually, for smaller numbers, I don't think mass media is going to be the solution because the law of big numbers, as my statistics professor taught me, only works on big numbers. It doesn't work on small numbers. So if you look at mass media like email or billboards or TV, that's for very large numbers. It's not going to work for getting a specific small number of customers that you need to get. So for that, it's actually more of a sales problem than it is a marketing problem. But here's how marketing can support that and do part of that for you. And so you can break that down by having a CEO who understands what the top goals are, company goals, and then derive from those, help them derive what marketing can do to achieve that and support that. If the CEO doesn't even have those high level goals, then I don't know how I or anyone else could succeed in that situation because, as the caterpillar told Alice in Wonderland, if you don't know where you're going, every direction is going to be fine. There's just no way, if you can't imagine where the company wants to be in 12 months, then how are we going to know that we succeeded in getting there? I don't know how to handle that situation.
So I love this answer. And the next one, I will talk a bit about the diligence process from the perspective of the founder. And for their like funding round, like mainly like A and B. I know that there are a lot of like seed and A founders seeing this show, and some of them don't know how does the due diligence process for the marketing department. We're talking here a bit about marketing. Looks like on a different stage of the investment. What does the investors ask as regards for the marketing roles? What are the metrics that they look on?
So at high level, in the early stages of companies you're talking about, the two main things that marketing is expected to produce is number one, pipeline, and number two, a story. Clear messaging. What do we do? What is the value that we bring to what audience? How are we different from other solutions out there? Why you should care, why you should buy from us. Those are the two things. And so that's what usually my board slides focused on in those first stages of the company. So again, let's say that you have a goal for the year of creating $1 million in revenue. Create $1 million in revenue. You want to be on the safe side. Let's say you need a 4x coverage of pipeline. So you need $4 million of pipeline. Now, let's say that your deals take 2 to 3 months to close. So you work back from that and you know when you need to create those pipelines. Basically, by the beginning of first quarter of the last quarter, you have to have all that pipeline. Otherwise, there's no chance of the sales team closing it in time. And so every quarter you report on, here's my goal for the end of quarter. Here's where I am in reality. If there's a gap, here's what I'm doing about it. Here's what I think caused it. And then hopefully next quarter we see an improvement and some lessons learned from that. And so that's what we do on pipeline. If everything is going well, we should be at or more than what my goals for pipeline were, or at least consistently hitting them. Even though it's very rare that every single cylinder is firing fully, especially once there's some complexity in the business, like you might have an SMB and mid-market and enterprise. So these might have more to eat than they can chew, and these might be a little bit hungry. And sometimes you overhired AEs, but the SDRs aren't ready. And sometimes you have over SDR capacity, but no AEs to take the calls. There's always something to balance between sales, marketing, SDR. But pipeline is usually the number one thing that the CEO and the board and the investors care about. If there's healthy, I'll quote my CFO, Tim, revenue cures all ails. If revenue is coming in, and to do that, of course, we need pipeline. Everything else is probably forgivable. And then the second thing is the story. So having a clear story that everyone who's customer facing can tell. What do we do? What problem do we solve? Who do we solve it for? Why is it better than other alternatives? And today, using AI tools like Gong, we can measure the adoption of that story by every customer-facing function in the company. Who's using it? How is it landing? We can go and listen to those calls. We can see an aggregate what percentage of the team is using it. If Team APAC is using it, but Team North America is not using it, we can go in and ask questions why. We can do more reinforcement and training. And so having a clear story that stands out and eventually gets quoted by customers, by analysts, by press, that's how you know that you've achieved that. So in the early days of Gong, we measured a lot of social media listening to see how our story was landing. And we had a goal that we wanted to dominate 2/3 of the conversation about conversation intelligence on social media. So every week I had an agency go on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and measure not what the brands like Gong and executives like Udi and Amit were saying, but how much engagement we got, how many comments and retweets and shares and likes we got, because that shows that the market is responding and creating conversation with us. And we measured that for a year to make sure that we're dominating at least 2/3. So the goal was to be twice as engaging than everyone else combined. And we actually hit that and more. So we regularly dominated 75 to 85% of that conversation. And focusing and optimizing for that in the early years was a big part of our success in brand building, because we were producing a lot of counterintuitive, sometimes controversial content that got a lot of people to engage with us and have a conversation. And even when our sales numbers were very similar to another competitor in the space, we got 3 times more publicity, and that really helped us get off to a much better start.
I love it, and definitely I think it's a great way to build a brand. And I've learned that sometimes people need to think that you're the category leader, and it can be not as important as actual being the category leader, because this would lead you to lead this category.
Well, to take a different angle on that, our CEO likes to say, we built a product so good that a mediocre go-to-market team could sell it, and we built a go-to-market team so great that they could push a mediocre product. If you build them both, then the sky's the limit, and that's what we did.
So we talk about your marketing team, and happy to understand what are the top 3 qualities that you look for when you hire your marketing team.
There's things that I can teach, and there's things that I know I cannot teach, and so I need someone to come with them. One example is raw energy and motivation. That's something that is very easy to detect in an in-person interview. I think it's still doable over a few Zoom interviews, which is how we usually do the first screenings today. It's very difficult to detect in writing, especially now when a lot of people are using ChatGPT for their writing. I don't know how to teach energy and passion and hunger, but those are absolutely qualities that I look for. And so if someone comes in looking tired and just exhausted And it could be, a point of time in their life that their current job or current bosses depress them, but I don't know that I can pull that out. I can pull them out of it, and how long it will take, and if they can even come out of it. I don't think I'm going to get what I need from a person in that state. And I know I'm probably disqualifying some otherwise good candidates, but that's the quality that I look for. I need someone who's excited to join the team and can't wait to sink their teeth into the challenges and work that we need to do. The second thing I look for is ability to quickly self-learn. And this is always important, I think more so in early stages of companies where we don't have an employee handbook, we don't have processes, we don't have an onboarding course, we don't have a lot of structure. And we need everyone on the team to be able to figure things out for themselves. And so to uncover some of those qualities, I'll ask people like, tell me about a recent skill that you picked up. Like, why did you need to learn it and how did you go about it? And I want to hear how they, it could be something as simple as I found a few YouTube videos and figured out how to do it. Great. That's something I try to teach my kids to do instead of asking me about everything they need. It could be, I took this course and I got certified, or I went to someone I know who's an expert and I asked them to sit with me for 2 hours and teach me how to do it, or I listened to these podcasts and I read this book. I want to see self-learning skills because, again, I don't think I can teach those in a cost-effective way if someone is coming to me without those skills. One of my peers at Sixth Sense, she's now the CRO. She was their CMO, Latiny. She's famous for saying, I only hired fully developed adults to my team. So that's a bit of a harsh way of saying it, but it's kind of what we're all looking for. I want someone who knows how to learn for themselves and are excited to do so to solve problems. So that I would say are some of the top qualities. Another thing I will say is that when I can, I do like hiring for potential over experience. And great story I have, and I have several, but one of the great stories is when we were putting on our first customer event back in 2019. Russell was the head of my demand gen team, and he had a friend through a dance company that they were both danced in, and he wanted to bring him in as an intern to help us prepare for our customer event. And he brought in Vince. Vince was working on his uncle's Filipino food truck when Russell called him and said, hey, we're doing this event. We need an extra pair of hands. Can you come help us for a couple of months? And Vince said, sure. And in those few months, Vince came in, and very quickly, everyone on the team fell in love with his passion and hunger and helpfulness. And after the event, Russell suggested that we keep Vince and let him manage our social media, because we were talking about bringing our first dedicated person to handle social media. Up until that point, I think it was Chris Orlob who was managing all of our content, was also managing social. And we said, sure, we'll let Vince handle that. And Vince is still with the company all those years later and doing a fantastic job, and has grown from social media to marketing operations, and built our merchandise store and built a whole bunch of different things. And I'm super proud of Gong for letting me give Vince that opportunity, taking someone with a very untraditional background and bringing him into his first tech company, into his first marketing role, and a pretty high stakes role at that, managing Gong social media, which is a huge part of our brand efforts. And under Vince's management, our social media growth has been phenomenal. I think we're at about 300,000 followers on LinkedIn right now, which for a B2B brand is very respectable. And a lot of that is thanks to Vince's work there. So I don't always go for the safe bet. I think there's certain roles, if I needed brain surgery, I probably wouldn't go for potential over experience. I'd want someone who's not doing this for the first time on my brain. But luckily in marketing, it's very rare that the stakes are that high. And for many, many things that we do, there's many untraditional background candidates that we should consider. And they often bring in a lot of hunger and motivation that you wouldn't find with someone who's been doing this for 10 or 15 years. And they bring unconventional approaches and points of view. And you can really turn around someone's life while making your team better at the same time.
So we talk about those success moves. that you did with the hiring. If we talk about the classic marketing to the clients, can you share an example of a successful marketing strategy that one of your clients at Gong used and the way that they implemented what you're doing into their whole marketing scene?
Sure. So there's many ways that Gong's marketing team and our client's marketing team use revenue intelligence to make their business better. Um, I can give you a few examples. So okay, here's one. We have a client, and I'm using this story with their permission. We have a Canadian client called Touch Bistro. They make a point of sale hardware and software solution for restaurants. And before they were using Gong, part of their sales team focused on the hardware components of what they were selling. It's kind of an iPad system with some peripherals. And some of their sales team focused on the software part. And each of them were like, well, this is what I believe works best. And they all did their best. As soon as they started using Gong, they actually saw that the sales reps focusing on the software components, which was proprietary, they were not creating their hardware themselves. They were just repackaging it. But when they were focusing on their proprietary software, their win rates were much higher. And they never had a way of doing that before Gong came in and actually analyzed the calls and said, okay, Sarah and Tom are getting the highest quotas and highest win rates. And by analyzing their calls, Gong found that they're doing that by focusing on software. Dick and Harry, they're at the bottom of the leaderboard. Their win rates are the poorest on the team. And Gong analyzed and saw that they tend to focus more on hardware than they do on software. As soon as the team at Touch Bistro saw those results, they retrained the team and said, okay, now that we have the data, we're all going to do it one way. We're going to follow Gong's advice. We're going to focus on software. And they did that for a quarter, and everyone's win rates went up. And so that's a great example of using, and this is a few years old, so there's a lot more advancement in AI that you could use today, but that's just taking something pretty basic to us, using AI to make the business better, understanding what the right message is. Do we need to focus on hardware or software? Well, now we know the answer. It's not whatever you feel like. It's actually software is working much better for this market at this time. Here's another simple example. At one of our big clients who shall remain nameless, they discounted a competitor who they believed only showed up in their enterprise segments. And they didn't think that that competitor shows up in their mid-market deal. A few weeks into using Gong, they saw that that competitor is coming up about 40% of the calls in their mid-market deals. And the product marketing team saw that and changed their first call deck to preemptively differentiate against that competitor because they realized they might not get another chance to do that. Because if you're not talking about that competitor and your salesperson is unprepared to answer questions about them when the customer brings it up, if your customer then goes and takes a call with that competitor and they do a better job of differentiating against you, they might never come back. And you've lost that deal before you were even in the game. And so they changed their preemptive differentiation against that competitor for a segment that without Gong, they had no idea was showing up so often. And they saw their win rates go up in that segment, specifically against that competitor, because their reps were better armed with better messaging. So those are just a few of the many examples I can give.
I love it, and I will say that as in my marketing hat, having this data and then taking it into the top of the funnel, actually, not only putting it, what I love doing is taking those very brilliant insight and then tie them up together. Like we have the best software, and then to go drill down in the messaging is something that can actually not only improve your win rate, but actually dramatically increase your pipeline.
Absolutely.
And we talk about when everything is working well and we double down on our revenue. Happy to discuss on a time when a marketing campaign didn't go as planned.
I have many examples of things that didn't go as planned, as anyone who's ever done something would probably agree. We like focusing on successes, and that's what we've become hopefully known for. But there's a lot of experimentation, and therefore a lot of things that don't go as planned on the way. A pretty expensive mistake was my second Super Bowl commercial. So back in 21, and I've told this story many times, so I'll be brief here. I got the permission to run a Super Bowl commercial, being very strategic about buying regional media. So I did it at a fraction, tiny fraction of the cost that people think goes into a Super Bowl commercial. And we also, again, for budget reasons, were forced to make a very modest creative ad. And we did a really good job on that. An ad in 30 seconds, that's very, very little time, managed to be both funny and engaging. And in the first 4 seconds, the audience that it was meant for understood that it was for them. And we even got a chance to show a little bit of the product and explain how it's used. And it worked out really, really, really well. The results of that first Super Bowl commercial were that we saw a huge spike of traffic on the website, that we had a 30% higher traffic for the week. We had hundreds of calls. I think there were almost 500 calls talk about our ad that we measured within Gong. And at the end of that week, we saw a new record in pipeline creation. So for the modest investment that I made in that, those were fantastic results that even my CFO agreed was a brilliant investment. And then he helped me triple that investment for my second Super Bowl commercial. And there, things did not go nearly as well. I went again for the regional media buy, so that didn't change much. What did change was, one, I did not enjoy the element of surprise in that second year. In the first year, the fact that the company at Gong stage, a B2B startup for salespeople, was going on the Super Bowl, that surprised a lot of people, and a lot of the success came from that element of surprise. In the second year, it was not a surprise anymore, and we started talking about it probably too early, and people were just expecting it, and so we didn't see that big spike that we saw in the first year. That some of it came from the surprise. Two, our second year commercial, the creative, I think was a miss in many ways. In the first year, as I said, it was a much more modest commercial that talked about the product in an interesting way. In the second year, we didn't really talk about the product. It was a more typical Super Bowl commercial with some physical and audible gags, and it was some people thought it was funny. It was much bigger and fancy. But if you never heard about the product, you didn't come out of the commercial understanding what we do any better. And that was a miss. If you're a huge brand, a household name like a Budweiser or a Farmers Insurance, you don't have to explain what your product does if you're just going in it for the fun to be part of the Super Bowl. When you're still a growing B2B startup like Gong, in hindsight, I could not have afforded not to talk about the product and explain what it does for people who don't know. And those were some of the elements, the surprise that we didn't enjoy, not talking about the product. All those things contributed to lackluster results in that second year. And after that, I took the hint and didn't even ask for budget to do another one.
So you're in Gong for like 8 years, and you've been for a very, very long time. But we have seen that for many other marketing roles often have the shortest average tenure. And we're seeing in many reviews that the lifespan of the CMO is shorter than the CPO, the CTO, the CFO, the CEO, and others. And what advice do you give to founders and marketing executive to address this challenge? Because what I've heard in many places, and it takes us back to this type 3 CEO, is that unlike finance and product and tech, many people sure everyone understand marketing. And it's very easy to point out the finger. Hey, you're doing it wrong. We need to change the marketing. Everything doesn't go well. So let's, change the marketing. And What are your take on this, and what do you suggest?
Yeah, so I think a lot of this goes back to the due diligence that we talked about earlier, that maybe it was a wrong hire, either the wrong person for the wrong company or wrong timing. For example, if there's a product market fit that marketing can't solve, then even the best marketer is probably not going to be able to solve that and will have to leave or will be asked to leave because they couldn't solve a problem that's not in marketing. If it is a good fit to begin with, then I think the biggest advice is to continuously adapt to the changing state of the company, the changing state of the market, the state of the competition, the customer needs. The job in the first year should not look like the job in the third year and should not look like the job in the fifth year. You're scaling a different size of team. You have to invest in different types of people, in processes and structure. Budgets are different. Channels are different. We went at Gong from trying to scream from the rooftop so people know we exist to then switching to a challenge of focusing on creating a category. Once we conquered that, now the challenge is how do we continue to differentiate within our category and continue being the leader and break away from that. And those are very different stages. And everything that we do in marketing is different, from which channels do we use, what content do we create, what audiences do we target, what do our events look like, how do we address competition, if at all. All that changes in every one of those stages. And if you keep using the old playbook, it will go stale and will not serve you well. So you have to stay on your feet all the time, looking around you to see, okay, what did I do last year that's not going to work this year anymore? What needs to be done instead? And just adapt to all those changes in the environment. The ones who stay in seat, they manage to do that. I managed to do that from zero to a few hundreds of million in revenue, which is longer than most CMOs do it. I think at this stage, it's probably great that we have someone who's seen the next stage of growth, taking us to $1 billion in revenue and beyond, and bring some of those practices that I haven't.
And what are the biggest marketing mistakes that you see that startup constantly make?
Probably a bunch of them. I would say probably the most common one, and it also stems a lot from the pressure that maybe the CEO is putting on a novice marketer who doesn't know any better or doesn't have the confidence to speak up otherwise, is they focus most of their marketing on advertising sales offers and product related offers, which can work on those who are ready to buy right now. The problem is that about 95% of your market is not looking to buy right now. And we could, if we had more time, we could talk about that in detail. But I know we're towards the end here. So very briefly, there's the 95-5 rule that listeners can look up and read more about. But it basically states that in any given year, only about 20% of your market is looking to replace a solution that you're selling. And if that's true, then every quarter, only about 5% of them are looking to buy a solution like yours. And if that's true, and anyone who's done marketing for a while understands in B2B that that's typically true, it could be 5%, 7%, doesn't matter, but that's the range. Then why are you spending all of your marketing and specifically advertising and content dollars on sales offers that are only being picked up by those 5%? And that's probably the most common mistake that I see, because you're pouring all that money and it's falling on deaf ears, because 95% of the audience out there is not looking to buy from you this year. They need a completely different marketing plan. And that plan looks like valuable content and offers that bring value to your audience to keep you top of mind, so that in 12 or 18 months, when they are in market, you're the first name that they think of. But most companies don't do that early enough, spending all of their budget for that 5% of here's a sales offer, here's what we're offering, here's what you should switch. And there's multiple reasons why that doesn't work. And that's what the good companies get very early, that they need one plan for the 5%, which is sales focused. They need a different value.
And I would go for the last two questions of this very interesting interview. If you could give yourself, your younger self, one advice in the beginning of your journey as a marketer, what would it be?
To think for myself and not take best practices too seriously. Best practices, by the time they become known as best practices, they're only ordinary practices and they're going to achieve ordinary results. And if you have unique problems and you want to achieve extraordinary results, you have to think for yourself and do things differently. And I think it takes some maturity and confidence and stepping out of the general advice that everyone's giving you. And the sooner you do that, I think the more exciting the job becomes, the more rewarding it becomes, and the higher your chance of achieving extraordinary results.
And for the last question is, what is the question that I needed to ask you, but I didn't?
Ooh, what question should have you asked me? There's many things we could have talked about, right? What should be the first hires that a CMO makes, or how to align with sales to make sure that that really prolongs the tenure of any CMO. So maybe I'll quickly answer that one because we talked about CMO tenure. I've never seen a successful company where sales and marketing were in silos and not working very closely together. Yet that's so often the situation when I advise a handful of companies, and I see sometimes their challenges stem from sales and marketing just being on completely different pages. There's no way to succeed like that. And that's another one of the things that's going to lower the chances of the company succeeding and going to lower the CMO tenure. So learn how to align with your head of sales. Maybe it's difficult. Maybe you don't like each other. None of that matters. If you don't align and come together as a team to tackle the company priorities and come to the CEO with joint solutions to problems, if you don't do that, if you're finger pointing and blaming each other, neither of you are going to succeed in what you're doing. And marketing is probably going to be the first to find itself outside the door, because that's usually what happens. So hopefully there's another piece of valuable advice there.
Udi, I had a great time in this interview. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having me, Etgar.
Bye.